Hey guys, today we'll be doing the brakes on the Toyota Prius 2004. So to get started, we need all these things. Floor jack stand as well. There's going to be a lot of wrenches right here. I have a 17 and a 14. Those are the spanners. I have the 17 socket as well as the 14 socket. Breaker bar. This is to remove the lug nuts on the tire, and then of course wheel locks. Here's a torque wrench going up to 80. This is an extension, 3/8, because there's going to be some stubborn bolts. WD-40, brake cleaner, M8 1.25 by 30. This is to remove the rotor from the rest of it if it's rusted. Wire brush to clean, mallet, some hooks to hook the caliper. There's the jack stand, the C-clamp, and then we have the Detroit axle P822 as well as the R31377 rotor. In the trunk of the car on the right side, you can see the battery. You remove the large plug and then the small plug, and then the 12-volt battery is now unhooked from your car. Under the hood, you want to uncap the brake fluid reservoir. You also want to chock the rear tires just in case the car decides to roll back. Next, loosen the lug nuts on the wheel. Then, using a jack, find the jack point, jack the car up, and place jack stands right under. As you see, I have them on the frame here. Then I can remove the lug nuts, place the wheel under the car, and begin working. The caliper has two 14mm bolts, so I'm using a breaker bar to loosen them up. Then I follow up with a ratchet and a wrench to be able to remove those. The reason for using the wrench on the inner nut is so it stays still when I'm trying to remove the outer nut. Otherwise, both of them will spin together and then you'll be in an endless loop trying to remove the outer nut. Now I can remove these two by hand and set them aside for now. After that, I'm going to remove the caliper and use this rope to latch it onto the suspension. So it looks like this. So we got to make sure that the caliper is not hanging by the brake line. I have this little swing for the caliper to dangle on. And that gives us access to removing the brake pads, which if all you're doing is replacing those, you can skip ahead. But for those of us replacing rotors, turn the wheel to the direction of which you're trying to replace the rotor. So for me, it's the left side. Then we'll be able to access this bolt and this bolt right here, both 17mm. So we're going to need the breaker bar, a 3/8 extension, and the 17mm socket. Since I'm trying to remove the bolts on the left side, I'm using my breaker bar and pulling upward because that's counterclockwise. So this one is broken and willing to turn now. The problem is the top one. So if you take this and put it here, notice that that bolt gets in the way. This is why I mentioned getting the 3/8 socket extension. But if you don't have that, this is where you can use some WD-40 and then the 17mm spanner wrench along with a mallet/hammer. So take a look at this combination where I have the spanner wrench by the ring side on the bolt, and then you can hit it upward with this mallet. But since I do have the extension, I'm just going to use that along with the breaker bar to turn it in the counterclockwise direction. So I can pull up and then that will break this bolt, thankfully. And then I'll be able to turn it with a ratchet. Likewise the bottom one. Then I'll be able to loosen those two 17mm bolts by hand, put those aside, put the caliper bracket aside as well. And now for the rotor. Remember those M8 screws from earlier? There are these two small holes where you can turn them clockwise until they fit snugly in the rotor. Then you're able to get a ratchet, turn it half turn at a time until you hear a popping sound, or the rotor may just slip and fall. Which on this side it did not pop, it just came right off, just as you see here. Now it's time to get out our Detroit axle new rotors, so compare that to the old rotor which was on the right side. Clean it with a generous amount of brake cleaner on both front and back. Everywhere you can see, you should clean. Then on the hub itself, you want to clean that with some brake cleaner as well. Then scrub it with a metal brush so you get a smooth surface to apply the rotor to. Then take your newly cleaned rotor and place it on here. Should fit like this. Then take your caliper bracket. We have to remove the old metal hardware from it, Mine came right off easily, but for some of you, you might need a flat tip screwdriver to assist. Then I'm going to clean it with the metallic brush. And then likewise on the other side. Next, take a look at this. You have the old ones right here and the new ones right here. So we're going to put this right here. It should snap like this. So we take a look at it. New hardware snaps in. Push it from all the directions. There we go. That's the new hardware. Then we'll put the caliper bracket back on. Take the two 17mm bolts and put them back in their respective locations. So you have one up here, it's going to hand tighten that, and another one over here, hand tighten that as well. I have my ratchet / 17mm / 3/8 extension going to turn that clockwise for both of the bolts. Tighten them as far as I possibly can. Then I'm going to take my torque wrench, torque that to 81. So here it's 80, I'm just going to do 80, and then when it clicks, I'm going to try to turn it a little bit more. I have my extension, my 17mm, I'm going to turn that clockwise as well until it clicks, and turn it just a little bit more. So I have the proper torque there. And likewise for the bottom bolt, I'm going to do the exact same thing as I did for the top bolt, except here I removed the 3/8 extension. And for this part, I have my 6-inch clamp, my old brake pad, and I'm using it to push the piston back. So on the old brake pad, you'll notice that there's one tab that sticks outward. That's the inner pad. So it goes in like this. And then the outer pad doesn't have a protruding tab. That one goes that way. Each of them have these metal shims on them. So if your new pads don't have them, you have to transfer these metal shims to the next pads. But for me, I already have those metal shims on my pads, so no problem. This is the outer pad, since it doesn't have that protruding metal piece. Then this inner pad has a protruding metal piece, so we're going to put that on the inside. Slide it in. There are the pads. Now we can slide the caliper back onto the caliper bracket like so. It should fit nicely, and you should be able to take your two 14mm bolts and hand tighten them back onto the caliper bracket, like you see here. Then we take our 17mm wrench and our 14mm socket, going to hand tighten those, then use a torque wrench set to 25 to torque that bolt as well as the one on top. When that torque wrench clicks, you're good to go. Now I can take the wheel out from under the car, place that wheel back onto the hub, screw these lug nuts back in, tighten the bolts, lower the jack, after removing the jack stands of course, and tighten all of the lug nuts, place the brake fluid cap back onto this reservoir, plug the battery back in using the first white plug first and then the smaller white plug second. Now your 12-volt battery is connected once again. Remove this chock from the wheel. Then get back in the car, take it for a test drive. But of course, before I do that, I'm going to pump the brakes just a little bit, turn the car on, pump the brakes again, and then go for a drive. The car is back on. Just going to make sure there are no warning lights. Those go away when the car goes to ready, thankfully. Now I'll pump the brakes again, like so. Now take it for a drive. Do like 10 miles an hour, stop, 20, stop, 30, stop, 40, stop. And after that, you'll build confidence in your new brake job. Hope you guys found this helpful. Please like, subscribe, comment, share. Let me know what you think, and I hope to see you in the next video. Goodbye.